How do you outsmart anyone without saying a single word? You do it by living in such a way that your very silence speaks louder than the noise of the world. People can argue with your opinions, they can twist your statements, they can resist your words, but they cannot deny the undeniable power of a life anchored in truth, rooted in self-control, and surrendered to the authority of God. When you learn the art of restraint, when you discover the strength of composure, and when you choose to let your actions declare what your lips do not, you step into a level of wisdom and influence that no deception can overthrow. You outsmart not with arguments, not with clever debates, but with a presence so filled with the power of God that even silence becomes a weapon of victory. Think about it. The loudest people in life are often the most insecure. They scramble to be heard because deep down they are afraid of being unseen. But the one who knows that God is watching, the one who trusts that God weighs every motive, the one who believes that God rewards the faithful, such a person does not need to fight for the spotlight. Their stillness is not weakness, it is strength under control. Their silence is not emptiness, it is filled with conviction. Their lack of reaction is not ignorance, it is wisdom sharpened by divine discernment. And when you walk in that power, you begin to outsmart those who seek to trap you, to manipulate you, to provoke you, because you will not be moved by their schemes. You see, the most powerful victories in life are not always won in the arenas of argument, but in the chambers of self-discipline. God does not tell us to shout back at every insult. He does not instruct us to react to every provocation. Instead, God tells us to be still and know that He is God. That stillness is not passivity, it is strategy. It is the wisdom of knowing when to speak and when to remain quiet. And in the silence of your soul, as you anchor yourself in the truth of God, you are outsmarting the very forces that try to destabilize you. The world will try to lure you into battles that are not worth fighting. It will tempt you to defend your pride, to prove your worth, to fight for your reputation. But the one who knows God does not need to be enslaved by the opinions of men. When you understand that God sees everything and that He alone is your defender, you are free from the trap of trying to convince everyone else. That is how you outsmart without saying a word. You stand tall in the confidence of God's truth and let your life be the answer. Have you ever noticed how silence can make people uncomfortable? They expect you to react, to explain, to justify yourself. And when you don't, they are left wrestling with their own conscience. Your silence exposes their motives. Your calmness reveals their chaos. Your restraint magnifies their lack of control. And without lifting a finger, without opening your mouth, you outmaneuver the schemes of those who seek to disturb your peace. This is not human cunning. It is divine wisdom. It is the power that comes when you align yourself with God's will and refuse to let the noise of the world dictate the state of your spirit. The truth is, not every battle deserves your energy. Not every critic deserves your attention. Not every provocation deserves your response. There is power in silence, but not just any silence. The silence that is fortified by faith, the silence that is rooted in the certainty that God is in control. That kind of silence is not weakness. It is strength at its highest level. It is how you outsmart without lifting a word. Because when you refuse to stoop down to the level of your enemies, you force them to confront the futility of their attacks. And let me tell you something powerful. When you learn to remain unmoved, you become unpredictable to those who seek to control you. The manipulator thrives on reaction. The deceiver depends on your emotional response. The enemy builds traps hoping you will step into them through anger, pride, or fear. But when you remain silent, when you remain anchored, when you remain steadfast in God, every trap is exposed and every scheme collapses. You outsmart not by force, not by noise, but by walking in a wisdom that cannot be shaken. When you stand in silence, trusting in the authority of God, you are not doing nothing. You are doing something greater than words could ever accomplish. Words can be twisted. Arguments can be misunderstood, but silence wrapped in faith is like a shield that cannot be penetrated. It is a fire that consumes every lie without you ever having to defend yourself. People may wonder why you did not reply, why you did not explain, why you did not retaliate. But what they fail to see is that your silence is not weakness. It is alignment with the higher wisdom of God, who fights battles beyond human understanding. Think of how many people have fallen into traps simply because they could not hold their tongue. They gave the enemy the very weapon that was later used against them. They allowed anger to guide their words and their pride to dictate their actions. But the wise soul, guided by the hand of God, learns restraint. Silence is not cowardice. It is a declaration that you will not be baited into foolishness. It is an announcement that you refuse to waste your energy on what does not build your soul. It is the mark of someone who knows that the only voice that matters is the voice of God. There is a reason God calls His people to be slow to speak, slow to anger, and quick to listen. Because the one who listens more than they speak, the one who observes more than they react, the one who discerns before they decide, this is the one who cannot be manipulated. You outsmart not by rushing into conflict, but by watching with clarity, by seeing what others cannot see, and by waiting on the guidance of God. People will wonder how you keep avoiding disaster, how you keep slipping out of traps, how you keep overcoming schemes. They do not realize that your silence gave you the vision to see what they could not, and your trust in God gave you the strength to act only when it truly mattered. There is power in patience. There is authority in restraint. The one who rushes to speak often exposes their own weakness, but the one who holds their peace reveals their mastery. Do you want to outsmart without speaking? Then guard your tongue like treasure, because the tongue can betray you in moments of anger, but silence will never betray you when you are standing in the presence of God. Silence gives space for God to reveal what is hidden. Silence gives room for your enemies to unravel themselves. Silence gives time for truth to surface without your interference. And in that waiting, in that surrender, in that stillness, you are outsmarting forces you cannot even see with your natural eyes. Have you noticed that sometimes the greatest reply to lies is no reply at all? Lies feed off attention. Gossip thrives on your response. Slander survives when you defend yourself. But when you give no fuel to their fire, it burns out on its own. And those who lied, those who mocked, those who accused, end up standing in the ashes of their own schemes while you walk away untouched. That is the brilliance of divine silence. It lets truth defend itself and lets God vindicate His people without you needing to lift your voice. This is why God's wisdom is not like human wisdom. Human wisdom says, prove yourself. Show them they are wrong. Speak so that everyone will know. But God's wisdom whispers, be still. Wait, trust me. Let me fight for you. And when you obey that voice, when you step back and let God step forward, the outcome will always be greater than anything you could have argued into existence. Outsmarting others without words is not about cleverness. It is about surrender. It is about letting your trust in God be so firm that you have no need to win arguments, because you know God is writing the final word over your life. Do not misunderstand this silence. It is not the silence of fear. It is not the silence of intimidation. It is the silence of strength. The silence of a warrior who does not need to prove his weapon because the enemy already knows its power. The silence of a soul so secure in God that the noise of the world becomes irrelevant. The silence of one who understands that storms may rage, but the command of God stills every sea. When you live in that kind of silence, you do not need to say a word to outsmart anyone. The presence of God within you says more than words ever could. And let me tell you something deep. Silence can often be the loudest sermon you ever preach. Your refusal to engage in bitterness testifies of your trust in God. Your decision to walk away from foolish arguments speaks louder than shouting ever could. Your calmness in the face of hostility reveals that you are held by a power greater than anything on earth. Outsmarting without speaking is not about defeating others with tricks. It is about rising above them with faith. It is about walking at such a level with God that no one can drag you into the mud, because your spirit refuses to be lowered. The silence of a God-centered soul pierces deeper than arguments, reaches further than debates, and carries more weight than the loudest voices. And those who try to belittle you, those who try to provoke you, those who try to manipulate you, they are the ones who will be exposed by their own noise. For in the end, it is not the noise that endures, it is the truth. And the truth always belongs to God. There are moments in life when the greatest show of strength is not in what you say, but in what you refuse to say. The human heart acts to defend itself, to explain, to justify, to lash back when wrong. But the soul that has surrendered to God learns a different kind of power. It learns the discipline of silence, the patience of restraint, the wisdom of waiting on God's timing. This is not silence born of fear. It is silence born of strength. It is the silence of someone who knows that every word spoken will one day be weighed in the balance of eternity, and therefore chooses carefully when to speak and when to remain still. To outsmart without speaking is to live with such spiritual discernment that your silence becomes a mirror in which others see the truth of their own hearts. When you choose silence in the face of conflict, you are not simply holding your tongue, you are holding on to the authority of God. You are refusing to let your emotions rule you. You are declaring that your spirit will not bow to the bait of anger. This kind of silence unsettles those who try to provoke you, because they cannot control what they cannot predict. They expect an explosion, but they receive composure. They expect an argument, but they are met with peace. They expect retaliation, but they find themselves staring into the steady calm of someone anchored in God. That is how you outsmart without words, by breaking the cycle of reaction and standing in the stillness of divine strength. Do you realize that silence can often be a test of faith? God allows situations where people misjudge you, mistreat you, or misunderstand you, not so that you can rush to defend yourself, but so you can learn to trust Him as your defender. For it is written that vengeance belongs to God, and He will repay. When you step back and let God step forward, you are testifying that you believe His justice is greater than your retaliation. Outsmarting others without words means letting your silence become a stage where God Himself acts on your behalf. And when God fights for you, there is no enemy who can prevail. Consider how silence gives you vision. When everyone else is talking, when arguments are flying, when the noise is deafening, silence becomes your sanctuary. In silence, you hear the whispers of God's guidance. In silence, you see the motives that words often conceal. In silence, you gain the perspective that others miss in their rush to speak. The one who practices silence becomes the one who sees deeper, who discerns clearer, who understands more. And when you see what others cannot, you outsmart them without saying a word. This is why the wise have always cherished restraint. The fool is known by his many words, but the wise are marked by their careful silence. To speak when necessary is wisdom, but to remain silent when words are futile is greater wisdom still. Outsmarting others without words requires humility, the humility to let God's truth shine brighter than your defense. It requires discipline, the discipline to master your emotions and submit them to God. It requires courage, the courage to walk away from arguments that add no value to your soul. And in that humility, that discipline, that courage, you rise above the schemes of those who sought to entangle you. Think of how many battles you have fought with your tongue that left you weary, wounded, and empty. Now imagine how many battles could have been avoided had you chosen silence and entrusted the outcome to God. Silence does not mean surrender. It means strategy. It means allowing God to work in ways your words could never achieve. For your words can only reach ears, but God's power reaches hearts. Your arguments can only influence minds, but God's presence transforms souls. That is why silence in faith is stronger than speech in pride. Do not be mistaken. Silence is not always easy. It takes more strength to remain quiet than to retaliate. It takes more courage to let go than to fight back. It takes more faith to trust God with your defense than to craft your own. But the reward of silence is immeasurable. It brings peace where there could have been chaos. It brings dignity where there could have been disgrace. It brings victory where there could have been defeat. Outsmarting without words is not about winning debates. It is about winning the higher battle for your soul, for your peace, for your destiny. And let us not forget the power of presence. There are times when simply standing in the strength of God's Spirit speaks louder than any argument. Your calmness becomes a sermon. Your composure becomes a lesson. Your silence becomes a testimony. Those who try to provoke you are left disarmed because they cannot fight someone who refuses to descend to their level. They cannot manipulate someone who is anchored in God. They cannot trap someone who has chosen restraint over reaction. And so, without ever raising your voice, you outsmart them. The beauty of this wisdom is that it transcends human cunning. Outsmarting without words is not about deception. It is about revelation. It is about letting God's truth reveal itself through your restraint. It is about letting the fruit of patience grow in the soil of your silence. It is about showing the world that the strongest voice is often the one that does not speak, but allows God's presence to echo louder than words. There are victories that can never be won with words, because words are too small to carry the weight of divine wisdom. There are battles that can never be won with arguments, because arguments only stir more conflict. But there are triumphs that are won in silence, the silence that is filled with faith, the silence that trusts the hand of God, the silence that knows peace is more powerful than retaliation. That kind of silence is not passive, it is active. It is the silence of someone who is firmly rooted, like a tree planted by streams of water, unshaken by the storms, unbent by the winds. To outsmart without words is to live as though you already know the final outcome, because your confidence is not in the voices of people, but in the eternal voice of God. When someone lies about you, you may feel the urge to explain. When someone mocks you, you may feel the temptation to fight back. When someone misunderstands you, your pride cries out for correction. Yet the soul surrendered to God knows that defending itself is not always necessary. Sometimes the greatest defense is no defense at all. For when you remain silent, you allow God to speak on your behalf in ways you never could. You allow Him to work in the shadows, revealing truth in His timing, exposing schemes without your interference. Outsmarting without words is not running from conflict. It is rising above it, refusing to play the games of those who thrive on chaos. Your silence is a mystery to your enemies. They cannot comprehend it. They provoke you to see your reaction, but when you remain calm, it unsettles them. They accuse you, but when you do not respond, their accusations echo back upon themselves. They slander you, but when you stay still, their words lose power, drifting into emptiness. And the more you remain anchored in God, the more their efforts collapse, because they have no control over you. Outsmarting without words strips away their power by refusing to feed it. It leaves them wrestling with their own conscience, while you remain at peace. This is why silence is often described as golden. It is golden not because it is rare, but because it is invaluable. In silence, you preserve your energy for what truly matters. In silence, you guard your soul against bitterness. In silence, you gain clarity about your path. In silence, you declare that your faith is greater than your fear, and your trust in God is stronger than your need for approval. That silence becomes a shield that no enemy can break, and a sword that cuts through the fog of deception. Without saying a word, you outsmart those who sought to entrap you. Understand this: the one who reacts loses control, but the one who restrains gains control. Reaction is a sign of weakness, but restraint is a sign of strength. The person who controls their words shows mastery over themselves, and mastery over self is mastery over circumstance. If you can hold your tongue when provoked, you are stronger than the one who conquers cities. If you can keep your peace when attacked, you are greater than the one who wins wars. Because the greatest battle is not against others, it is against your own impulses. And when you master that battle, you have already outsmarted the world. Silence also teaches you to listen. To listen not only to the words of others, but to the whispers of God. For in the quiet he speaks. In the stillness he reveals. In the pause he guides. Many miss the voice of God because they are too busy filling the air with their own. But the silent soul hears what the noisy soul cannot. Outsmarting without words is therefore not just about dealing with others. It is about positioning yourself to receive wisdom directly from the one who sees all. When you listen to God more than you speak to people, you will walk in discernment that no deception can withstand. Consider how silence exposes the intentions of others. When you refuse to engage, when you do not rise to their provocations, when you do not answer their accusations, their true nature becomes clear. The liar reveals themselves without your interference. The manipulator entangles themselves without your effort. The deceiver falls into their own trap without your involvement. By saying nothing, you shine a light on what is hidden, because lies cannot stand without resistance. They crumble under their own weight when given no attention. In this way, your silence is not empty, it is powerful. It is a mirror that forces others to face themselves. And yet, silence does not mean you are voiceless. In truth, your silence speaks louder than words ever could. It says, I trust God. It says, I will not stoop to foolishness. It says, I am not bound by your opinion of me. It says, my peace cannot be stolen because my peace comes from God. This message resounds louder than shouting, clearer than arguments, stronger than explanations. It is the voice of your spirit declaring the sovereignty of God over your life. Do not think that silence leaves you powerless. Silence, in the hands of a faithful soul, is the greatest power of all. It confuses the enemy, it unsettles the mocker, it humbles the proud, and it glorifies God because it shows that your trust is not in human defense, but in divine protection. To outsmart without words is to live so fully in the confidence of God that you no longer need to prove yourself. Your life proves it. Your peace proves it. Your silence proves it. There comes a time when silence becomes the highest expression of strength, because in that silence you are saying, I will not be mastered by anger. I will not be led by pride. I will not be governed by fear. I am guided only by the hand of God. Outsmarting without words is the art of letting your spirit stand taller than your voice. It is the decision to let your actions, your composure, and your unshakable trust in God speak more powerfully than anything you could ever say. The one who argues may win the moment, but the one who is silent in faith wins eternity, because their victory is not built on human approval, but on divine assurance. When you keep your peace, you place your trust in the one who sees every hidden scheme. People may conspire, but God uncovers. They may plot, but God dismantles. They may raise their voices against you, but God silences them in His time. That is why you do not need to answer every insult. You do not need to correct every rumor. You do not need to fight for every ounce of recognition. When you belong to God, He Himself will vindicate you. Outsmarting without words is the refusal to descend into battles that God has already won on your behalf. Silence also preserves your dignity. Words can be twisted, but dignity is untouchable when rooted in God. People may not understand why you stay quiet, but in time they will respect it. They may call it weakness, but in time they will see it as wisdom. They may misinterpret it, but eventually the truth will shine. This is because silence is not about how others perceive you, it is about how you carry yourself before God. To remain calm under pressure, to stay composed when attacked, to walk away when provoked. This is the dignity of a soul that knows its worth in God and does not need validation from men. There is a silence that defeats arguments, and there is a silence that disarms enemies. But there is also a silence that teaches you. In silence, you learn to measure your thoughts before they become words. In silence, you see the difference between what is urgent and what is important. In silence, you grow in patience, in humility, in clarity. Outsmarting without words is not only about handling others, it is about shaping yourself. It is about becoming so rooted in God's wisdom that you no longer waste your breath on what is meaningless, but invest your words only where they bear fruit. Imagine two people in conflict. One is loud, shouting, desperate to win the argument. The other is quiet, composed, steady as a rock. Which one looks stronger? Which one commands the room? It is always the one who is calm. Why? Because calmness reveals confidence, and confidence comes from knowing you are backed by God. Those who are loud betray their insecurity, but those who are silent reveal their strength. This is why silence is not weakness. It is a declaration of faith. It is saying, I do not fear your opinion. I do not bow to your accusations. I know who I am in God, and I will not be moved. Never forget that silence is also a weapon of peace. Arguments escalate when words multiply, but arguments die when silence is chosen. Enemies expect retaliation, but when you give none, they are left powerless. Gossip spreads through conversation, but when you stay quiet, it dies in the air. Hatred thrives on reaction, but when you do not react, it suffocates. This is why silence outsmarts. It ends battles without fighting them. It kills flames without feeding them. It turns conflict into emptiness, and the emptiness left behind is filled by the presence of God. The wise understand that not every truth must be spoken immediately. Sometimes silence is the womb in which truth matures. Sometimes God hides his plans in silence until the perfect moment. If God himself works in silence, why do we believe that speaking quickly is always the answer? Outsmarting without words is to trust that God's timing is perfect, that he will reveal, he will expose, he will defend in the exact moment that will bring him the most glory. Until then, you remain still, waiting on him, letting silence testify of your faith. And here is a mystery. Silence often speaks to hearts that words could never reach. The way you hold your peace under attack can pierce the conscience of your enemy. The way you refuse to fight back can convict the one who sought to provoke you. The way you stand calm can plant seeds of wonder in those who witness it. People may not remember your arguments, but they will remember your composure. They may forget what you said, but they will not forget how you carried yourself. That memory will linger, echoing louder than any speech, because it carries the fragrance of God's presence. There is a wisdom that cannot be purchased with gold, a strength that cannot be found in armies, a power that cannot be measured by titles. It is the wisdom of silence, the strength of restraint, the power of self-control under the authority of God. Outsmarting without words is not merely a strategy. It is a spiritual posture. It is the ability to stand in the middle of chaos without letting chaos enter you. It is the ability to hear lies without feeling the need to chase them down. It is the ability to face slander without bowing to the pressure of defending yourself. This wisdom is not learned from books, nor taught by the world. It is gifted to those who walk with God, who surrender their pride, and who place their full trust in him. Understand this: silence in the hands of a believer is not emptiness, it is fullness. It is full of trust, full of patience, full of dignity, full of peace. Silence says, I do not need to speak because God is speaking for me. Silence says, I will not react because God is acting on my behalf. Silence says, I will not waste my energy on what does not matter because God is my focus. When you walk in that kind of silence, you disarm every enemy, you confuse every critic, you frustrate every manipulator because you refuse to play by their rules. Your silence is not weakness. It is wisdom forged in the fire of faith. The world teaches you that to win, you must always have the last word. But God teaches you that sometimes victory belongs to those who do not speak at all. The world tells you that strength is shown by shouting louder, but God shows you that true strength is proven by standing calmer. The world says you must fight back to prove your worth, but God whispers, "Be still and I will prove it for you." When you align yourself with that divine wisdom, you step into a level of power that no argument, no debate, no confrontation can take away. That is how you outsmart, by refusing to be dragged into battles that do not deserve your soul. Look around at those who constantly fight with their words. Their energy drains, their peace fades, their joy disappears, their hearts grow bitter, and yet look at the one who remains quiet, who entrusts everything to God, who chooses stillness over strife. Their spirit shines, their dignity remains, their peace flows like a river. Outsmarting without words is not about ignoring reality. It is about refusing to let reality control you. It is about being so deeply anchored in God that the storms outside never shake the calm within. Even nature teaches this truth. The mountains do not speak, yet they declare strength. The rivers do not argue, yet they carve valleys. The stars do not shout, yet they illuminate the night. In silence, they reveal the greatness of God. So too with you. When you walk in silence before God, your presence alone becomes a testimony. Without raising your voice, you show that you belong to a power greater than anything on earth. Without uttering a word, you reveal that you are led not by fear, but by faith. There is also a silence that preserves your destiny. Many lives are destroyed because words were spoken in haste, secrets were revealed in anger, or promises were broken in pride. But when you master silence, you protect your future. You do not reveal your every plan, because you know not everyone who listens wishes you well. You do not share your every dream, because you understand that some are waiting to sabotage it. Outsmarting without words is also about discretion, about knowing that sometimes the holiest thing you can do is keep what God has placed in your heart between you and Him until He decides to reveal it. Silence does not mean inactivity. In silence you pray. In silence you think. In silence you plan. In silence you wait on the guidance of God. And then, when the time is right, your actions speak louder than any argument ever could. Outsmarting without words is not about doing nothing. It is about doing the right thing at the right time, guided not by emotion, but by God. While others are busy reacting, you are preparing. While others are wasting energy, you are conserving strength. While others are scattering their focus, you are centering yours on God. And when the moment comes, your victory is undeniable. But here is something deeper. Silence is not only a shield, it is also a mirror. It reflects back the hearts of those around you. When you stay silent, people reveal themselves. The liar will keep lying until they entangle themselves. The accuser will keep accusing until their falsehood becomes obvious. The manipulator will keep pushing until their motives are exposed. You did not need to argue. You did not need to fight. You did not need to defend. Your silence allowed their own actions to reveal the truth. That is why silence is not weakness. It is wisdom that lets time and truth do the work for you. And do not forget, silence is an act of worship. When you hold your tongue rather than speaking in anger, you honor God. When you choose stillness instead of chaos, you honor God. When you refuse to gossip, to slander, to retaliate, you honor God. Outsmarting without words is not just about dealing with people. It is about living in such a way that every choice reflects your trust in God. That trust is the foundation of your silence. That trust is what makes your silence stronger than any argument. That trust is what turns your silence into victory. There is a reason God calls us to guard our tongues, because the tongue can set entire forests on fire, but silence can extinguish flames before they begin. The tongue can cut like a sword, but silence can shield like armor. The tongue can ruin reputations, but silence can preserve destiny. Outsmarting without words is the art of holding back what could harm you, of withholding what could weaken you, and of allowing God to be your voice when your voice is not needed. For when you remain silent in faith, You are declaring that you trust His wisdom more than your impulses, His justice more than your pride, His timing more than your urgency. Many people mistake silence for defeat. They think that if you do not reply, you have lost. They assume that if you do not argue, you have surrendered. But what they do not understand is that silence is often the victory itself. It is not surrender, it is strategy. It is not weakness. It is strength refined by patience. Silence is not losing, it is allowing the truth to win without your interference. You do not need to rush to correct every misunderstanding when you believe in God's timing. You do not need to scramble to fight every accusation when you trust that God is your defender. Silence is not about abandoning the fight. It is about recognizing that the fight does not always belong to you, but to God. And this silence is not empty. It is filled with vision. In silence, you can see what others miss. You can see the traps that anger hides. You can see the motives behind the words. You can see the doors that God is opening, even while others are trying to close them. People who rush to speak cannot see beyond the moment, but the one who waits silently sees beyond the surface. Silence sharpens your spiritual eyesight. It allows you to discern what is hidden beneath the noise. It grants you wisdom to recognize what others overlook. Outsmarting without words means letting silence train your eyes to see what noise always blinds. Have you noticed how silence protects peace? When you refuse to reply to bitterness, you protect your peace. When you choose not to argue with fools, you protect your peace. When you hold back your words in moments of anger, you protect your peace. And peace is priceless, because peace is the evidence of God's presence within you. The enemy does not simply want your words, he wants your peace. He wants you so agitated that you cannot think, so angry that you cannot pray, so defensive that you cannot rest. But silence denies him that victory. Silence says, "You cannot have my peace, because my peace comes from God, and I will not give it away for the price of an argument." Do not underestimate the power of walking away. Sometimes the most intelligent move is to withdraw, to step aside, to let silence speak where your words are not required. The one who knows when to walk away is wiser than the one who insists on fighting every battle. To walk away is not to quit. It is to choose your battles carefully. It is to say, "This is not worth my soul. This is not worth my peace. This is not worth my destiny." Outsmarting without words often means knowing when to let go, knowing when to remain still, knowing when to trust that God will do what you cannot. And think of how silence humbles the proud. When someone tries to provoke you and you do not respond, they grow frustrated. When someone mocks you and you do not answer, they are unsettled. When someone tries to pull you into chaos but you refuse, they are left standing alone in their noise. Your silence magnifies their emptiness. Your calmness exposes their insecurity. Your restraint shines a light on their lack of control. Without lifting a word, you have outsmarted them, because their schemes crumble without your reaction to hold them together. This is why silence is powerful. It dismantles the plans of the enemy without a single word spoken. But silence is not only about protecting yourself from others, it is about aligning yourself with God. When you stay silent, you make space for His voice to be heard. When you stop talking, you can start listening. And in those quiet moments, He gives you wisdom that no debate could provide, strength that no argument could bring, and clarity that no shouting could reveal. The silent soul is the listening soul, and the listening soul becomes the discerning soul. Outsmarting without words is therefore not about cleverness. It is about surrender. It is about letting your silence become the ground where God plants His wisdom. There is also a silence that reveals maturity. Children argue over everything, but maturity knows when to stay quiet. The immature shout to be heard, but the mature understand that not every voice needs to be raised. Maturity says, "I will not let anger control me. I will not let pride rule me. I will not let foolishness define me." That is the silence of maturity, and it is the silence that outsmarts the world. For the one who is silent in wisdom is greater than the one who is loud in folly. So let your silence be intentional. Let it be filled with faith, not fear. Let it be grounded in strength, not weakness. Let it be guided by wisdom, not pride. When you walk in this kind of silence, you do not need to announce your strength. People see it. You do not need to explain your peace. People feel it. You do not need to declare your dignity. People recognize it. Without saying a word, you carry an authority that cannot be denied, because it is not yours alone. It is God's presence within you. And so, my friend, remember this truth: the strongest voice is not always the loudest one. The greatest victory is not always the most public one. And the most powerful weapon is not always forged in words. Sometimes the greatest